What if everything you've ever been taught about focus is, well, not just wrong, but the very thing that's making it feel impossible? What if that constant struggle to concentrate isn't some personal failing, but actually the result of following a totally broken model? Let's get into this, because what we're about to unpack could honestly change your entire relationship with work, with learning, and with your own mind.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You're staring at a page or a screen. You reread the same sentence 3, 4 times, and you're literally wrestling with your own brain just to pay attention. It just feels like this draining uphill battle. But why? Why should the simple act of learning something new feel so utterly exhausting?
Well, the story we're always told is that focus is basically a muscle, that you've got to grit your teeth, you've got to fight off all the distractions, and just exert this raw, brute force discipline. But what if that whole idea is the very thing holding you back? What if real, deep focus isn't a fight at all?
To see a different way, let's look at someone who was basically a magician of the mind, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. See, he didn't run on willpower. He operated on a completely different principle, something almost the exact opposite.
Just let that sink in for a second. Undisciplined, irreverent. This isn't advice about forcing yourself to do anything. It's about letting your genuine, authentic interests just pull you along. Feynman knew that discipline doesn't create interest. It's the other way around. Interest creates its own discipline, almost automatically.
And this, right here, just perfectly nails the difference. So much of conventional learning is about cramming facts through rote memorization, right? Feynman absolutely hated that. He called the result fragile knowledge. His way was totally different. It was all about playful, almost compulsive exploration. He wasn't trying to remember stuff. He was driven by a need to truly understand it. And this is the heart of it, isn't it? You can memorize the name of a bird in 10 different languages, but at the end of the day, you still know absolutely nothing about the bird. For Feynman, true knowledge wasn't this list of facts you could recite. It was a deep, intuitive feel for how things actually worked.
So was Feynman just some one-of-a-kind genius? Or was his intuition tapping into a really deep biological truth about how all of our brains are actually wired to learn? Well, as it turns out, modern neuroscience has found the answer.
It really all comes down to this idea called intrinsic motivation. Just think of it as our brain's factory setting, this built-in, natural drive to be curious, to explore, to learn, just for the pure fun and satisfaction of it. It's not about getting a good grade or a reward. The learning itself is the reward.
And the absolute peak of this whole experience is what psychologists call a flow state. You know this feeling. We've all been there. It's that magical zone where hours just disappear. You're completely absorbed, you're perfectly challenged, and paying attention feels, well, it feels completely and utterly effortless.
So this gives us two totally different models for attention. First, you've got forced concentration. That's a top-down, brute force command from the front of your brain. It's incredibly expensive, energy-wise. But then you have natural attention. That's a bottom-up process where your interest just kind of grabs you, making the whole thing efficient and automatic.
Okay, but this is where the story gets really fascinating. Scientists got obsessed with the question, what is actually happening in our brains and our bodies during these different states? And they designed an experiment, and the results are, well, they're quietly shocking, and they flip our entire idea of effort completely upside down.
So in this key study on flow, the scientists measured two things at the same time. First, subjective effort. That's how hard the participants felt like they were trying. And second, objective physiological effort. How hard their brains were actually working by measuring things like heart rate. And here's the result. Just look at this chart, because it's wild. See that bar on the left? That's the felt effort. It's incredibly low. The people in the study said it felt almost easy. Now look at the bar on the right, the physiological effort, how hard their brains were actually firing. It is at its absolute peak. So get this, they felt like they were just coasting, but their brains were performing at maximum capacity.
Let that sink in for a second. The state where your brain is the most productive, the most engaged, working its absolute hardest, is the one that feels the most effortless. This is the whole point. Peak performance doesn't feel like strain. It feels like the complete absence of it. So what does all this mean for you and for me and for anyone who's ever struggled with focus? It means we've been playing the wrong game this whole time. It was never, ever about willpower.
And look, this isn't some new age productivity hack. As this quote from neuroscience research shows, it's literally baked into our biology. This intrinsic drive we have to explore and play is an ancient system. It's not a bug we need to discipline away. It's our brain's most powerful and efficient way of operating.
Which brings us to this final, and I think pretty liberating realization. All of that frustration, all that exhaustion, that feeling that maybe you're just not good at concentrating, it was never a personal failure. You weren't bad at focusing. You were just taught the wrong idea of what focus even is. You were handed the wrong map and told to fight your way through a jungle that wasn't even there.
And so that leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. What could you learn or create or solve if you just gave up the fight? What would you achieve if you stopped trying to force focus and instead you simply allowed yourself to follow the natural gravity of your own curiosity?